first of the three main topics. And that is that if you want to be optimizing your productivity, I would ask you to consider organizing your space. It is very challenging to focus on what's important when you have a lot of clutter in your space. And, we'll talk about kind of a workspace. If you're working from home, that's one of the first suggestions is choose a dedicated space in your home that you're going to use from work, and then try to organize it as much as you're able. So let's go through some of the steps for organizing your physical space, and this can apply to a workspace or it can apply to any space in your home. So if you're spending more time in your home, which many of us are nowadays, and you're looking around going, one of the things I really want to spend some time on is organizing, these are the steps that you can follow. So we like to talk about the SPACE acronym, S-P-A-C-E. S stands for sort, P for purge, A, assign a home, C, contain, and E, establish habits. So I want to go through each of those and break them down for you. This is the process, by the way, that we follow with clients when we're helping them physically organize. And we are doing more virtual organizing sessions right now than we are in person. So keep that in mind, that is an option if you want help in the organizing process. All right, so the S stands for sort, and what we mean there is group and gather like items together. So it's easier to see what you have if you can see things in collections. So all writing utensils, if you're in your office, all writing utensils, all paperwork, all supplies, just grouping and gathering like items together is the first step. That's going to make the second step easier because that's where you're going to make decisions on what you really need. So P in the SPACE acronym stands for purging or clearing clutter. So I define clutter as anything that's not necessary or not adding value to your work or your life, and as such, it's probably doing the opposite. It's probably detracting or distracting you. So we want to clear that clutter so it's easier to find what you need when you need it and easier to focus on work. So some great questions to ask are, as you're considering the things in your space, do I need it? Do I really need it? So that is the first question to ask. Now, many of you have probably followed or are familiar with Marie Kondo and the Kondo method of organizing. So she's an author and she wrote The Magic of Tidying Up. There was a bit of a movement. There was a TV show that she did, and her main question to ask is, does this spark joy? So her suggestion was getting rid of anything that doesn't spark joy in your life. I think the idea of value is helpful. For example, my plunger does not spark joy for me, but if I need it, does it add value? You bet. So that's just a little differentiation there between her philosophy and mine. So does this add value? As you're considering if you need it and you work for an employer, or if you're self-employed, you might consider your own company's legal guidelines or compliance guidelines, especially if you're in a regulated industry, around what you're expected to and required to keep and for how long. So your company may have a records retention guideline or policy, and you're going to want to know about that, especially if you're going through information and data. So we talked about, is it adding value or is it getting in your way? I also like to think about what's the worst that could happen if I get rid of this and 6 months from now I realize I need it. Would it be easy to replicate or replace? And for example, if it was information that I had found online, maybe printed as a resource, but haven't referred to in a while, if I got rid of it, could I just find that resource again? And in fact, might that resource be updated online and it's a more current version anyway? So what's the worst that would happen if you needed it and you didn't have it? The answer to that question can help you decide if you should keep it or let it go. So if the answer to that question is that there would be very high legal or financial ramifications, you might err on the side of keeping it. And then we talked about, can I get it someplace else? So clearing clutter is the second step in the process of getting organized, and it's a critical one. All right, so the A in the SPACE acronym is assign a home. So once you've sorted, grouping and gathering things that are common together, you've purged, cleared the clutter. Now you want to take what's left and you want to assign a home. So this is a concept I'm sure you've heard before, but everything having a home helps you get and stay organized. So some principles to organizing that you want to consider as you're figuring out where things should go is keeping like items together. Just makes it easier to find that thing when you are looking in a place where all those things are. Keeping items close to where they're used, and you might want to think about creating zones. So if there's a multi-use room in your home, you might have some areas or zones of activity. You know, a place in a family room, for example, where the best lighting is to read might be the place where you keep reading material. Maybe there is another place in the room where you're setting up a temporary home office. And so making sure that you keep the things related to that in that area. So a garage is another good example of, wanting to think about zones where there's maybe sporting equipment in one area, maybe there's camping equipment or automotive supplies or extra household goods if you're using your garage for that. So kind of almost setting up shops. I know one of my employees really likes to talk about the idea of different shops in your home or your office. So having Office Depot, having Radio Shack for electronics, having any other retail establishment. So thinking about zones. And then we mentioned having a place for everything. If you're challenged by a small space, don't forget about the vertical space. So it's easy for us to fill up our horizontal surfaces. We know that, but sometimes we forget about the vertical possibility. So even on a desk, we've got the horizontal surface, but we also have, going up from that, if we put a tiered file holder, we might find that that's a better way to keep organized where we can really see things in a way that's different than if we just stack them on a horizontal surface. Adding shelves to a wall where you have that room is also a possibility. So lots of different areas or ways that you can use the vertical space. Another main principle is giving the things that you use most often the best real estate. So you want to keep things that you use all the time at an arm's length. You want to keep things that you use less often away because that prime real estate needs to be reserved for the things that you use every day and multiple times during the day. So for example, I might keep the things I'm working on right now on top of my desk, and then in a file drawer, I might keep projects that I would work on next. Right? And then in a file cabinet that's farther away from the desk, I might keep more archived records or files that, maybe I'm going to get into once a month or once a year when it's tax time, but that doesn't need to be right at the desk. So build around your natural habits. So think about, are you right-handed or left-handed? This is going to impact where you keep things. So for example, on my desk, my phone is on my left-hand side because I'm right-handed. So I am going to be more likely to pick up the phone if I have to hold the handset with my left hand because I'm going to take notes possibly with my right. So it would not make as much sense to have my phone over on my right-hand side where I'd have to cross my body, and it just wouldn't work that way. So think about your natural flow, how work flows in your workspace, both coming in, going out, and think about how tall are you when you're considering where to keep things, and are there other people that need to access things in that space as well, and what do they need? So if you are in an area where you have kids needing to access space, of course, up high is a great place to put things that you don't want them to access, but not a great place for things to put where you want them to be able to put away their own things and expecting that they could reach that. So just some considerations there. All right, the C in the SPACE acronym stands for contain. This is a step in the process that a lot of people get excited about and want to do first. So I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you think about, okay, I'm going to get organized, I'm going to order, I'm going to go buy a bunch of containers and that's going to help. Well, it might, or you might just end up with a bunch of containers as clutter because it's important to do the first 3 steps first so you know what it is you need to contain. Then you can consider what size container do I need. You've already assigned a home so you know where that container is going to go. You can measure if you have a certain depth of shelf that you're going to put a container on. And then we can also think outside the box, a little pun on containers, to say, what is a container really? It's anything that holds things together and holds things in place. So a file folder is a container, a drawer is a container, a desktop file holder, like I mentioned, can be a container. So think about what you need. I think it's a great idea to organize the top of your desk for maximum use. So I mentioned before that tiered file holder, if you feel like you need to have files out. Also think about something with compartments. If you're going to keep office supplies out, to keep things separated inside a drawer, having drawer dividers could be important. If you have a supply room or an area where you're keeping kind of a backup supply, keeping that organized, labeling it, so if there are other people that need to get things, they know where to find those things, that's important as well. And then reference files, I mentioned files, folders, those are containers as well. Think about having an inbox. Now, not many people have an old-fashioned inbox anymore, a literal box on their desk, but your mailbox is an inbox, right? And you bring the mail in every day. So I want you to think about when things land in your office or your home office, where is it that they're going to land, and can you empty that each day? And we'll talk a little bit more about those incoming items in a bit. Okay, the E in the SPACE acronym stands for established habits. So this is such a critical thing to staying organized. The first few steps get you organized, clears clutter, helps you figure out where to keep things, helps contain them. Now you got to think about how are you going to keep this up. And I like to use this quote, organizing is a process, not an event. So now and then, as your life or work changes, you need to revisit your organized systems and think about what you need to change there. This is why periodically you need to go through your things, because you may make a different decision today than you would have made 6 months ago based on what's going on for you today. Anytime there's a life transition, a job transition, those are also good times to consider not only how your space is organized, but what habits you have to keep it organized. So there will be some things you're going to want to do to maintain the organization on a daily basis. So a habit like having if you've got kids at home, even just an end of day 10-minute tidy, put on some music, get everybody to put things away. That's a daily habit for maintaining organization, right? Maybe there are some things that you do on an ongoing basis to maintain organization where once a week you're doing some planning. We'll talk about that. Or going through some files quarterly, for example. Maybe there are some things that you're going to do annually. So these are maintenance steps that I would recommend putting on your calendar so that you don't forget. So establishing habits is the last step in that process. All right, so we've talked about organizing your physical space, the key components there, clearing clutter, assigning a home that makes sense for easiest access so you can find what you need when you need it, and then establishing habits so that you can maintain that organization and continue to be in control of your environment. And it is amazing the tie between our external environment and our internal peace of mind and sense of control, and the opposite can be true too. I know right now, for example, I'm normally a very regular email processor and process down to ideally 0 every day. But right now that hasn't happened because I'm getting so many emails, and we're going to talk about this next, the incoming items issue. But the external environment, or in this case, the example I'm using is my email inbox, is a reflection of what's going on internally for me. So there internally is a lot more stress, anxiety, uncertainty, frankly, a little bit of chaos with what's going on in the world today. So I'm having a harder time realistically keeping up with organizing the outside environment. Now, if I want to do something about it, I know it's going to make me feel better internally. So those are two things to consider: is how do you feel internally, and is there a way to reduce your stress so that you can be more in control externally? And the opposite, sometimes we need to start with the external and establish some order so that we feel less stress and in more control.